Hello, this is Audiobooks with Anna, and I'm your host, Anna Clements. In this episode, we chat with and discover the many voices of Joel Froomkin. Joel shares his journey through voice and theatre to acting, directing, coaching and narrating, his classes and cruises. A fascinating insight into his story and events that have shaped him and made him the talent that he is. Join us to find out more about the king of acting for audio. Hello and welcome. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Super excited that you're here. I'm a huge fan, as I'm sure you know.
Oh,
So I'm going to start with a really easy question. Are you ready?
yes.
What's your favorite emoji?
What's my favorite emoji?
Yeah.
That's so okay. This is really easy. It is definitely the monkey holding its hands over its eyes.
That's perfect. Love that. When I ask this question, I'm always fascinated. People usually go, if you mean the one I use the most, it's this. But if you mean the one I love receiving the most, and there's always a story to emojis for some reason.
That's a great one.
Absolutely love that. Thank you. Well, Joel, rather than introduce you, tell us about you. Who were you before audiobooks? Take us back to little Joel.
Oh, God, how depressing.
Tell us a story.
Little Joel was a very awkward youth who liked to dress up as Wonder Woman at the age of 6, and thought that was perfectly normal. And I was that kid who didn't fit in and that loved theater and loved art and wanted to be Angela Lansbury when I grew up, and got put in lockers and stuffed in trash cans and all that fun stuff. I went to
where was this? Where was this taking place?
This was in Bermuda. I went to a very Dickensian British school, really like Hogwarts without any of the fun. And it was very kind of, very like rah sports. And if you didn't play rugby and if you didn't play soccer, and it was all male teachers. And it was a very good education. I had some teachers who loved English, like they really loved drama, in particular one who was a brilliant actor. His name was Nigel Kermode, and he was this fantastic Shakespearean actor with this brilliant voice. And I grew up kind of idolizing him, and the fellow who was kind of like my grandfather, not by blood, but by relationship, used to be, he was a cartoonist and used to do Sunday strips for the Walt Disney Company and the British newspapers and things like that. And he was this raconteur who could do a million voices and loved the sort of art of the real old sort of, wartime art of being able to tell stories around a table and play characters and entertain a room. And with those two particular people in my life, I really developed this love of escape and storytelling and being someone other. And I think I was very, very lucky to find that escape because I needed it,
Can I ask, were you a quiet child, Joel? Were you the watcher? Or were you desperate to be in making noise and doing stuff and actually just being closed down? That there are only two options.
That's so interesting. I think I was quiet unless I was in a very safe environment. And then I was sort of very keen to be heard and impress and sort of fit in with the adults. Because my social life really was around grown-ups much more than around kids my own age. And then when I started getting involved in community theater, that was also the case because I was like the only kid, and they kind of didn't love it in a lot of cases. It was an adult environment, and I was this like 13-year-old kid doing props backstage or whatever, but I would do anything to be involved. And so it was a weird childhood, but I wouldn't trade it because, I got this incredible love of English. I got this remarkable foundation in drama that I don't think most people have access to because the community theater there was so strong and well respected and filled with all these expats who loved theater and loved acting. Um, and I grew up with this cornucopia of British accents around me that most people never experience, because most people grow up and their teachers reflect the environment they're in. They sort of reflect the 20-mile radius of their of where their school is. And mine was the exact opposite. I grew up with Welsh and Irish and Scottish and Liverpool and Bolton and Yorkshire and and I just grew up with so many different sounds that it became sort of it tuned my ear, and I think I was in a very unique and lucky position because of that.
Yeah, little did you know how useful that was going to be later on.
Exactly.
Yeah, fantastic. Keep us going with the story. You're a teenage community theatre nerd, desperate to get involved and do stuff. What happened next?
Drama school, and then when I finished my undergrad in performance at USC, they didn't want me to leave, and they very kindly, one professor in particular was like, you need to stay, you need to do your master's. And they arranged for me to do my master's accelerated in 1 year, because that was the only way I would agree to do it. And I did a master's in directing and design. And that was a crazy year because I was taking like a gazillion credits at once. And then I ended up getting a apprenticeship in London, working for an absolute madman who had just bought a theater in the West End, a sort of a vanity project. And he would go through a bottle of scotch a day by around 3 p.m. And it was really like something out of a bad sitcom. It was just utter madness, the way this theater sort of, this West End theater was being run. But people were being fired every 4.5 seconds, and it was just crazy. But it bonded us all. We had a great time, and then I ended up moving on to assistant direct stuff like Delicate Balance with Maggie Smith and Eileen Atkins.
Wow.
And do other things, and I weirdly became the youngest designer in the history of the West End at age 21. And and then came to New York and was focusing on directing. After I did my master's, I realized I didn't think of myself. I thought of myself much more as a director than an actor. Partially because I was clearly a character actor. I was a weird look. I wasn't I wasn't 6 foot tall leading man material, and I didn't really know what my place was. And so it wasn't until many years later when I sort of came back to the concept of, wait, my voice can be any character I want it to be,
Yeah.
And I think that's such an incredible gift that I sort of circled back around to it after, I met my husband in New York, and we decided to start a theater company. And it's a long story that I've told before, but we ended up moving to Indiana to renovate a 100-year-old vaudeville theater. We'd never been to Indiana. I knew nothing about Indiana. And that was the big mistake. We fell in love with the building and fell in love with the art form of what we could do. But the environment was not healthy and not economically conducive to what we were trying to do. And I was also a theater professor at college there, university there. And we needed to sort of revisit. And a friend of mine who also grew up in Bermuda, she's a wonderful British actress named Beverly Crick, who's also a dialect mutt who bounces between American and British like I do, who records a ton for recorded books, said to me, you should try this. You should give it a go. You'd be great at it. And it's all down to her. And I did what luckily Sweetwater Sound, which I think all narrators have kind of heard of, or a lot of narrators have heard of, as the go-to sound company in America, actually had their headquarters was 35 minutes away from where we lived. And so we just got in the car, went and got what we needed, and set me up in a little cave. And I was full-time after 3 months. I was very fortunate.
Wow. Yeah, I think fortunate's not quite the right word. I had no idea that when I asked the question, who were you before audiobooks, that we were going to get quite such an incredibly rich tapestry of experiences and opportunities and talent that obviously got you from one place to the next and allowed you to step out and try things that, you speak of, working as an assistant director at a theatre in London, moving back to New York, meeting your husband, moving to Indiana, as if it was because the moment took you. And I think in a lot of people's lives, those are really big deals. Those are real turning points of decision making and commitment to a project or to a new way of life. Did it feel like that at the time?
Yeah, I mean, certainly the move to Indiana did. And then the decision to let that go in Indiana and turn a new leaf and try something different was very hard. I mean, Rich built, it was a stunning proscenium theater. I mean, and he literally we gutted the space and he built something that was just breathtaking to look at. And to just have to walk away from that and just go, this isn't working. We can't, it's just not. We were doing Les Mis, right? People, when you go to the licensing company and you get the rights for Les Mis, the first thing they tell you is you're going to need to build 2 weeks into your schedule as an extension because we've never had anybody do Les Mis and it not extend. We were doing Les Mis for 35 people in the audience. There were more people on stage than there were in the audience. And we were doing, we would do The Sound of Music and people would call for tickets and say, can you tell us what it's about? And we were like, oh my God, we're in the wrong place.
Yeah.
So that was really, I mean, it nearly broke my husband. It nearly broke Rich. It really did. It was very traumatic. But we had 2 restaurants at the same, it was crazy.
Wow.
But yeah, no, I totally recognize what you're saying. And yeah, I do think that they kind of registered as big life events, not necessarily. You don't go, oh, this is going to turn out to be useful, or there's, there's a silver lining to this, or because I'm thrilled with where our life has taken us. I love doing what I do every day. I didn't realize how much I missed acting, how much I missed playing with character, and getting to be part of that world again. And what you don't realize is how much, I think the fact that I have a background in directing is so useful to me. I think visually, Johnny Heller we both talk about working cinematically. And I absolutely visually do see the action unfolding in front of me when I narrate. And the dialect coaching that I was doing in New York and all that stuff, it just, life does sort of, the dominoes do fall in very interesting ways. And I think you're very astute to recognize that in a way that I don't necessarily a lot of the time.
One of my favorite phrases that I use a lot here that everybody else will know is we all underestimate our own abilities. I think we all take for granted sometimes the lives we've had or the experiences we've gone through. And when we're measuring ourselves against other people, we don't value the commitment and the experience that we've gained from all the things we've done. We kind of guess it's almost like a basic standard. And we look to other people going, yeah, but he did this and she did that. And I didn't do those things.
Yeah.
And I think it's really important sometimes to acknowledge that the reason you are the talent you are is because of how hard you've worked and all the experience you've had. So talk to us again. You got us as far as you drove to Sweetwater, which was 35 minutes away, and within 3 months you were booked solid. I love the way you make it sound like, and it probably was a dream come true because of all the work you'd put in beforehand, but you're still in Indiana at this point, still with the
yes,
theatre?
My booth was, we lived in what they call in America a shotgun apartment. In the old theater, the vaudeville house, the projectionist used to have an apartment that ran along where the underneath of the proscenium would be. So it was this weird hallway of an apartment with no sort of there was no corridors, right? It was just one long room shot through. And there was one room in there that literally was underneath the proscenium. So this, you can imagine like the slant of sorry, not the proscenium, the balcony. I meant the mezzanine, the balcony. So it was like this 40 little tiny room with like a 45-degree angle. And we sort of like stuck a bunch of blankets in there, and I was recording in there. And then I I again, I'm going to use this phrase, I was lucky, and you're going to contradict me, but I had approached an author, as one does. You learn to chase work. I'd approached an author about doing some of their work in audio because they didn't have any. A male, you know, a gay romance author, and they said yes to me doing a whole bunch of titles for them. And after I had done, I think, the first title, Tantor wanted to pick them up. And she said, well, I've already contracted someone else to do these books you want. Will you take him? And I've got to be eternally grateful for that. You know, it's a very kind thing to say. She could have just left me in the lurch. And they were like, well, can we have a sample? So Rich and his father built me. I mean, you know, as I said, he was renovating an entire theater. He knew what he was doing. Rich and his dad built me in 24 hours a double-walled booth, so that I passed Tantor's sound check test, because there was no way, in a concrete room, literally, like the entire thing was concrete, was under a balcony of a 100-year-old theater, was going to pass Tantor's sound specs. So they built me a booth in 24 hours, pretty much, and I sent them my sample. They approved me, and that was sort of the start of me getting publisher work. And it has all stemmed from doing gay romance. Every single one of my sort of initial, I think for the most part, maybe a couple exceptions, but for the most part, my breakthrough with Harper, my breakthrough with Hachette, my first foray with most publishers was through, you know, a very niche genre. And then, you know, they start to see you for other things and realize you have other tricks you can employ, and you can answer other questions for them. But it was all from those kinds of titles that the career developed.
Tell us what year this was, Joel, because I'm assuming there wasn't social media then. There wasn't this kind of camaraderie that we all have now with regards to sort of getting into the industry and finding out how it all works.
Oh, well, I was the Facebook, the Jeff Kafer, when Jeff used to be very active in that Facebook, which he's now not as much, but when he sort of used to be the head honcho of that group, that existed, and that was incredibly helpful to me. But it wasn't quite at this level, but this is about 7 years ago, I think, going on. A bunch of us started at the same time, you know, like Gary Furlong and James Foster and those kind of guys. We started at about the same time. Kurt Graves, we started about the same time as each other. And I think it's about 7 years ago, we're talking. But online was an incredible resource. I mean, the way I learned how to use Reaper was from Stephen J. Cohen's blog post that is still searchable. You look up Reaper narrator configuration, and his blog post of how to set it up is what I used and still use to this day. So I think without the online resource, it would have been very, very scary. You're absolutely right. We're very lucky, I think, how supportive the community is. Yeah. I mean, absolutely. And like journeys, you know, something else I don't even connect as much, but it's so true, is that not only having taught acting in a university setting was very helpful to where life would now take me, and also the directing, because one thing I hear from my students is that I'm specific and I'm actionable. I don't give general notes. I try to really make sure they have tools to walk away with. And that comes from being a director during a final dress rehearsal and having to give notes to 20 people in an hour. And it's your last chance to get the show where you need it to be. And you have to learn to be very concise, supportive, and make people understand what adjustments you believe can lead them to success in a succinct way. And I think that is not just the I think I'm very lucky in not having just had the director's vision and background and experience, but also that way of communicating with another actor, I think stood me in great stead.
Yeah, I appreciate the judiciousness required for, just before everybody's going to go on. You don't want to be changing everything and confusing everyone. And that's a teaching tool too, isn't it? As you say, which we'll come on to, because that's what we're really here for. But I must just read you what Matt Bates has written in the chat, which says, what useful stuff did you learn as an assistant director, especially working with Anthony Page? Context, my wife assisted him on shows 2001 through 6, and we met on the Master Builder, Small World.
Oh, that's crazy.
Isn't
it? She must have been working with that. I was with Anthony probably around 1999, I think. I've been very lucky. I've assisted, I think, 3 Tony nominated directors. And Anthony's won the Olivier, I'm sure, and directed some brilliant television work as well. It's interesting because working with Anthony on that, I can't say we had a terribly warm and fuzzy relationship. I admired him enormously. I think he's a very, very clever man. But when you're working with such powerhouse performers as that, when they are massive marquee personalities, you're gently sculpting. You're not, they know where they're going. And I think on that particular production, what I learned the most was watching Dame Maggie every single night develop a performance, because she's operated with a laser. She was so precise, and her performance would be absolutely dead on reliable, unless there was a moment she didn't like or something, and she would adjust it slightly. And if that laugh increased, if the titter turned into a chuckle, turned into a guffaw from the audience, she would lock it in like nobody's business. She was such a craftsperson, and so bright. Her mind is insanely fast. And watching her as a comedic tactician, she was constructing the comedic shape of that performance in the most extraordinary way. It was obviously her work is very organic and connected and real, but the brain work going on behind it in terms of how to craft an oral comedic experience and nail what she wanted was really quite extraordinary. And I worked with Walter Bobby, who directed Chicago, among other things, the Broadway production of Chicago that's running 35 years later. And Walter was very clever at how he crafted notes, how he would always make something, he was always it always sounded optimistic. It always sounded positive. I mean, I remember him like literally being like, this is an utter piece of shit. How the fuck are we going to get through this? They're just awful. I want to kill them all. And then walking down the aisle, and suddenly this sort of bright, sparkling imp of a man is all sunshine and optimism and he was very good at teaching me psychologically what actors needed in order to succeed. And but all of them, they have, above all, a respect for the actor and a respect for what the actor is bringing to the table and to the journey. Working in Britain with actors is very different than working in America. I found, and it's also why I think British narration in some ways is very different to a degree. But British actors don't enjoy a result-oriented rehearsal process. They want a process-oriented rehearsal process, and they're used to a longer rehearsal process. The great British actors are used to the RSC, where you don't put something up in 2 weeks, where it's developed and it is found. And so it's a different way of communicating. It's a different philosophy.
That's so interesting. And I think a conversation for a whole nother day, because that sounds like we have a lot of British and American narrators and actors within the group. And it's something that actually comes up quite often in conversation. We may have to have you back, Joel. But keep us going on the journey. So tell me, are you still in Indiana? Do you still own the theater?
The narration started happening around the time where we realized the theater was not what. Yeah, we decided to close the theater.
I'm sorry. The picture you drew of people phoning and asking The Sound of Music, what's it about? I think we all understand that it was obviously, unfortunately, just the wrong place. Perhaps if you'd been able to lift that theater and place it in a different crowd,
able to move that theater to Indianapolis, even, we would have been fine. The work was fantastic.
Yeah.
I was so proud of it. I mean, we did beautiful shows. We really did. But we basically were stuck. We had taken out, I think, a $50,000 loan to do Les Mis, which is a very long story and sounds financially like the stupidest thing in the world. But it was. We basically were at a point where we couldn't go back, and the bank, we had wanted to close, and the bank manager was very determined that we should keep going. And so he arranged for us to do this loan. And I think we literally just finished paying Les Mis off, I think 3 months ago or something insane like that. And it's been 10 years.
Yeah.
So that was, no, not 10 years. Yeah, about 7 years, I think.
And they wonder why people don't get into theater.
And they wonder why people, or at least theater in small town Indiana, I would avoid. Yeah, we sort of ended up like holed up in the theater, like, because we were doing shows, but we were stuck because we needed to get on our footing financially. And so we spent a couple really rough years just sort of living like hibernating animals in this rotten apartment above the theater, and just sort of avoiding people as much as we could. And then the audiobooks took off enough that we got someone to buy the theater. That was the main thing. It was very hard. Like, who the hell wants to buy a theater, right? And luckily, this couple that we had a pretty good relationship with, they're very clever. They started an antique business and then a boutique soda company, and they wanted to open a brewery. And so they bought it, and they're going to it's taking them time, but they're going to turn the theater into a brewery.
Oh, fantastic. Best of luck to them.
Yeah, absolutely. And put like all the whatever the big machines are, the big vats of whatever makes stuff happen up stage and things like that. So
So you're focusing now on audiobooks. So I'm trying to ease you into the beginning of what then became acting for audio. How did that come to be?
How did that come to be? I was, I was starting to coach more and more, and and the pandemic hit, and everybody was kind of stuck at home, and I think, and was like, Rich was asking me, was there something we could do to sort of engage people while they were, you know, trapped in their own in our little caves as we all were.
Yeah. I love this idea that Rich, who went from building a theatre from scratch and creating this incredible building, now needed something more metaphorical to build. Because it is quite the empire you have now. So congratulations on that front.
Thank you.
I was in the second.
Absolutely, you were the second graduating class.
Yes, thank you. That's the words I was after. And I must just say, for those who don't know, well, describe it to us, Joel, because you'll do a better job than I will. Because it really does feel like the reason I stepped into it, having not been to drama school, was that it gave me, and I feel like it really did give me a feeling of what it feels like to be dropped into talking about acting and acting for audio specifically, but actually at least the first 4 or 5 classes are, it filled my mind so completely. I had to delay a book so that I could commit to the 15 weeks of the class because I was absorbed. I was totally taken over by all the things you were sharing, having already done my fair share of acting classes and, had what I felt was a lot of information under my belt. It's a fantastic course. Tell us about it.
Oh, thank you. So that means so much to me on such a deep level. I really appreciate you saying that and sharing it. I'm so thrilled that you had that experience. I realized that so many people were coming to this art form from radio or broadcasting or because they simply loved reading on the page or from all these different walks of life that didn't have, acting training or were coming to it with some degree of acting training, but didn't have the knowledge of how to harness the skill from whatever milieu they were accomplished within, stage, television, whatever, to filter that into audio without feeling corseted and like they were no longer being as creative as they used to because we're told, it's so much less and it's flat and don't, stop, it's, we get messages that sometimes make like they're being told stop acting, but really it was about the fact that I knew that there was nothing out there that was allowing actors to gain technique, which you really don't teach. Yes, there are great coaches out there. There are remarkable audiobook coaches that are very talented, but there wasn't a kind of extended experience that facilitated people gaining an understanding of what professional actors do to approach the work. And I had taught acting in college, and at first I thought, oh, well, this is not going to be hard at all. We can just take the one thing and put it, we can use the one puzzle piece and put it in a different lens. But what I realized was with Zoom, how little was a direct correlation in terms of the exercises and approaches you could use, because so much of the first, 16 weeks of an acting course usually is partially nonverbal, but largely partner related. Working with, you're rolling around on the floor or you're, doing mirror exercises or partnering exercises with another person or staring into another person's eyes to learn to be comfortable with connection, et cetera, et cetera. So I had to really sort of go through, all these acting textbooks and resources and think, how can I make this so that it works for someone they're in a supportive group environment, but they're not able to work with the group per se. They're not able to rehearse or prepare or experience physical contact with. And what I eventually realized was it was a blessing, because 99% of the time our work is isolated and we don't have a scene partner. And we have to learn to harness our imagination in that way. So I think Rich blocked out like 3 weeks for me to create a syllabus and create the template. And we jumped into it. And, I'm so grateful to those. I think we had 3 sessions, the first course we ever did, and 3 groups of 10. And I'm so grateful to those folks, because they really did. They took an enormous chance, and they were they created a fantastic ensemble, and they also taught me so much about what to adjust and what people needed more of or less of. And every time I teach the class, it changes a little bit, or I'm using I'm introducing new elements or new tools, or just retooling it slightly to try and make it even more easy to absorb and actionable for the people that take the class. But what we ended up doing was taking the idea of a college semester and an acting 101 course, and compressing what would be your first year of acting at a conservatory into one semester, and then the latter half of that, taking the technique, the Stanislavski classic acting technique, and applying it directly to the specific needs and dictates of audiobooks, and how to incorporate all those tools as an actor in what I consider to be the most intimate of all acting forms, which I really do think audiobooks are. I mean, other than a tight close-up in film, you're never going to be more connected to your audience. You're never going to be working more intimately or more exposed in terms of working from a place of truth and honesty. And that was sort of the idea. And it seems to have taken off. And we added a part 2, which people were asking for. And the part 2 of the class uses all those foundations and techniques and applies them to specific narrator challenges that come up in our career over and over again. Having to voice, for instance, do a character voice in first-person narration, where if you do a lot of science fiction or paranormal or whatever, and the authors will write multiple POVs, you'll find yourself having to be a vulnerable, connected character doing a voice that is not your own authentic neutral in first person, working specifically with comedy, working specifically with crazy chunks of exposition that don't seem really actionable, doing group scenes, working with a dual scene partner, and how you create that relationship. So part 2 became very specific, question oriented, in order to continue applying those techniques. And then the demo class is about giving people weak, because I think everybody does this concept of creating demos. Just, it's so emotionally overwhelming, and you just feel it's like scaling a mountain trying to approach them. And so we created something where you tack one per week, and half of the class is actually choosing the right material with me, bouncing it back and forth and saying, yes, this answers this question. No, it doesn't, and sometimes, for instance, you think you're doing a paranormal sample, and it's only paranormal because it came from a paranormal book, but the sample itself has nothing paranormal about it.
Yeah.
and it's hard for us to see that sometimes without a second eye. So the demo class, tackles the 5 big demos that everyone should have in their wheelhouse, and then works individually with each actor to find ones that are targeted to their specific skill set, language skills, interests, dialect abilities, etc. And so at the end of the course, they've got this curated dossier of demos that hopefully showcases them really well. But also we found, and I wasn't expecting this because obviously it's the first result oriented class I've taught. Because it's like we have to, it's like the idea is get this good as opposed to it being about process, which is what most classes are about. We learned that there is a really strong educational component to the demo class too, because you're diving into specific genre, specific challenges and techniques that don't get talked about, a lot in general workshop or coaching approaches. So that was really exciting that people have found the educational component of the demo class as valuable as the result-oriented part as well. But yeah, I'm so lucky. Rich and I are so blessed that so many people have embraced it. We've had over 100 people at this point, I think, come through part 1. And, many people take the part 2 and the demo class as well. And it's created a community, which I'm so grateful for. And the way that they support each other and they stay connected, and the fact that I went to APAC and I couldn't walk 2 feet. I'm sure I know Sean has the exact same experience, but because he warned me about it as I was walking into APAC. Sean pulled me aside and said, "You need to prepare yourself for the fact that this event used to be about you trying to talk to people, and now it's going to be about people reconnecting with you." And he was absolutely right. Every 2 feet I was stepping, I had someone coming up to me that I had taught and only knew through online. And it's so precious and it means so much. And the chance to watch your students grow and, to get success and to be meeting their goals and connecting with other talented people is just it's such a privilege, and I'm very proud of it. I'm very proud of the trust people have shown in me, and the fact that the students of the class are the greatest advocates of it. I mean, they're the ones that sell the class for me. They're the ones that are ambassadors, and that's just remarkable.
Wonderful. It is fun. It's fantastic. Word of mouth is the best advertising, isn't it, really? And we've had Regina commented in the chat that it is a fantastic course, and we're all thrilled to have been able to take part. So thank you. I have so many more questions, and I'm aware that we only have 10 minutes left. So let me just remind everybody that we're here talking to Joel Froomkin about the life and times, it sounds like. But I have several specific questions I must ask before we get on to the adventures at sea. One of them that I wrote down was there a turning point for you? And I feel like if I were to answer it for you, which I shouldn't, this all feels like it was growing to this point. There was no moment where you should or shouldn't have taken a particular path. It feels like it's all been meant to be. Is that how it feels?
I think yes. I think you're absolutely right. I will say I'm one of those people that, lays down to try to go to sleep at night sometimes, and their mind spins and relives those moments of your life where you could just wish you could get back into a time machine and just alter one sentence or walk, walk 3 steps to a different doorway. And I definitely am someone like that, where I have a very hard time letting go of mistakes or things. But you're absolutely right that I feel really, really fortunate that everything that at the time may have seemed disastrous, and the successes obviously have led me to where I am right now in my career. And I am, if I could say anything, I wish I'd jumped into this 10 years sooner.
I am aware people often ask me, I came into this through, an office job and, 25 years of working in finance. And people often say, you're not sorry that you didn't come sooner to what has turned out to be the best job ever. And I wasn't ready. I wouldn't have been ready. I wasn't the person I am now.
Yeah.
And I think it's really important to remember that, yes, it would have been lovely to have had 10 extra years of this because it's fantastic. But actually, everything comes at its time, doesn't it? I'm aware, I'm reminded that the first time I came across you, there was a photograph of you dressed as a Tin Man at a conference. And I must just ask you, having seen the dress you wore to APAC, which was stunning, whether the initial impetus for stepping into a space and being so visible is comfortable for you, or is something you force yourself to do so that you have to be present?
It's a very clever question. And the answer is, and people won't believe this, I'm a horrible introvert. And what I have done at several points in my life is created something that encourages people to come up and talk to me and have something to talk about, rather than me have to go through the terror of approaching them. And that was the most remarkable gift that Rich gave me with the Audie's dress that he made from scratch, was that I walked in that room and everyone smiled and everyone came to me and said the most lovely things and asked me about it and asked me about, and I got to talk about Rich making it, and it is not about the ego of shine a spotlight on me. It is about the look at this thing that is attached to me. Let's talk about it.
So it was a real conversation starter, and it's a very clever tactic. Well done. We have one of the conversations we had before the conferences was about, as an introvert, how do you go about setting yourself up for success? And you certainly did. So congratulations. A couple of comments in the chat about Crystal says it's a brilliant strategy, fellow introvert here. And Shakira said the Audie's dress was perfection, and what a clever thing to do when you're feeling insecure. Well done. So yeah, people are really impressed with that, and with you generally, Joel. So well done. So talk to us then, before we run out of time, about your next new venture.
Well, I'm so excited about it, and the support has been fantastic. We've got just a wonderful group of narrators already coming, and we're already, we're 11 months out even, so it's phenomenal.
Start at the beginning for those in the audience who don't know what we're talking about.
We're doing an event called Audiobooks at Sea, which is a nautical narrator adventure. Rich and I had never been cruising. I'd never really loved the idea of cruising because it always sort of goes to, tropical climes. And having grown up in Bermuda, I was like, I don't need to go to a beach. I don't need to be on a boat. But we tried it 5 years ago and fell in love with it because it really is truly the only time I find myself switching off and actually allowing myself to sort of unplug from the world and relax, and everything is taken care of for you. You don't have to think about paying for drinks. You don't have to think about what to eat. You don't have to think about where to go. Everything is sort of, crafted for you in this already marvelous, safe environment. And Rich and I had thought about doing something with some kind of workshop on board a ship for a while. And after APAC, somebody, Terry, actually asked the question in a Facebook group. She was like, why hasn't anybody done this? And Rich and I were like, oh, well, shit, we better get our act together because people are talking about the idea. And so all this sort of work that Rich had been putting together for about a year, in a week, he sort of, crafted it into actually, a solid thing, and built the website and everything. And he did a phenomenal job. he became a he became a certified travel agent in order to help people with the booking and get them the best rates and everything. And so we just had this idea of creating a a workshop that's coupled with the rest and relaxation of being on the boat and getting to spend, afternoons going to visit Mexico and to visit Cozumel and to visit Nassau, etc. And we asked some people. I asked Sean, your lovely Sean Pratt, was so gracious and enthusiastic and jumped right on board with us as a coach. And I wanted to really spotlight because something I think doesn't get dealt with a lot in depth in workshops, because a lot of the time I think there's not time, is genre specific issues. So, I asked Travis Baldry, who is just, I think, a master narrator, one of the best, I think, working. And no one does fantasy and lit RPG and sci-fi and things better than he does. And he was just thrilled. And we asked Jessie Bickford from Blackstone, and she said yes. And Jacqueline Protho from Audio Flow is coming, and she's actually going to cast a book on board from the participants there. She's going to cast a multicast from the people on board. Joe Hempel, who created Fireside Audio, is coming. We're in the process of adding more coaches because our numbers have risen in terms of attendees, which is phenomenal, and we want to make sure it's a boutique experience. And we're working really hard to craft something that looks after newbies and welcomes them and gives them a great experience. But we really do want it to have a masterclass feel as well, where we are diving deep into things and not just and not going over some of the repetitious things that can tend to happen when you're jumping into an intro workshop experience. I really want to make sure that the seasoned narrators who come feel as fulfilled and excited and challenged as the new people, and we're working really hard to accomplish that. And also, all the publisher reps that we're bringing, the main publisher reps, are coming as coaches, so people get one-on-one time with them. Because I think that at all these events, we're just so stressed trying to make a connection with them. And so we really wanted to make it so that that is built into it. You get your time to read for them and hear their feedback and have that moment built into the schedule for you. I'm very excited about it. I'm so gratified by the enthusiasm. We've got really great numbers already, and phenomenal people are coming, and we're adding more coaches. And I think it's just going to be the most relaxing and invigorating learning and sharing experience that we can possibly build. And I'm really thrilled that the response has been what it is. I'm thrilled you're joining us, Anna, because you have so much to add in terms of just the way you speak about self-empowerment and owning your art and connecting to the truth of your voice and what you have to share with the world. I want to learn from you, and I need to hear that. And so I think that we're bringing on really specific people to talk about very targeted things that I'm really excited about. And I think that people are going to get, I really hope people will get as much out of it as we are crafting something special and unique to put together for them.
It is a brand new concept and such an exciting one. I'm going to ask you a question and then say some things to the audience while you think. And the question is that you leave us with, do you have a favorite audiobook memory? For the audience, I just want to comment that at the top of the page, if you pull to refresh, which basically means dragging your finger down the page on your phone, you'll see at the top there's a pinned link to the link tree on Joel's website, which actually takes you to his acting class, to these adventures at sea and to all sorts of other information about Joel and all the things you've heard today. So do feel free to check that out. Joel, do you have an answer for us?
I'm going to have to go with my first, which was Patrick Stewart reading A Christmas Carol.
Oh, wonderful.
And it changed my life. I didn't even realize when I was listening to it. I was probably 15 but I didn't realize the impact that performance, that ability to craft character and weave a story and play a million different vocal roles and just immerse a listener in a story would have on me. And it made me fall deeply in love with the idea of audiobooks and with the concept of being a storyteller who could bring an entire world to life. And I'll never forget sort of popping that cassette tape into the stereo all those years ago and just being blown away. And I think that's got to be it for me. That it was just extraordinary.
Yeah. For me, sorry, I say this every time, but it's Richard Burton's War of the Worlds used to stop me in my tracks. I would put the cassette tape into and it would just make me stand really still because I couldn't help but listen. Wonderful memories. And I'm thrilled you said that. So thank you. Well, thank you very much. Again, if you'd like to go and have a look in the chat, people are saying lots of lovely things about you and are thrilled by the conversation. So thank you very much for joining us. And I'm just going to do a last sort of 30-second wrap up, if that's okay. So thank you, Joel. No, thank you.
So much. This is
You're very welcome.
You make people feel very special and feel like they have a reason to be on this earth. And that in itself.
Luckily, people are special and they are due a space. I think none of us take up enough space and we need to be reminded that we can. So I'm really glad you came today. Thank you so much again.
Thank you.
Today we talked to the incredible Joel Froomkin. Thank you so much, Joel, for joining us. My takeaways: talent will out. Thank you very much to everyone who joined us, for joining us in the audience, those who contributed with your presence and with your chat in the chat. Thank you very much for coming and have a great week, everybody.
I hope you enjoyed this conversation with Joel Froomkin. Thank you very much for listening in and joining us on this podcast. Do remember to like and subscribe. It really does help. Further details about this conversation and everything else are in the show notes. And if you'd like to work with me or need any further information, do get in touch. Thank you for listening.